semi-automatic handguns of the modern era come in a number of different flavors. We have double action, single action, or double action only hammer-fired semi-automatic handguns, such as this Sig Sauer P226 here in my hand. We have striker-fired guns, such as the Glocks. We have the 1911 style handguns made by Colt and Kimber and similar companies. Of course, there are other designs out there, especially the handguns of the late 1800s, early 1900s, such as the blow-forward design as the Schwarlosa of 1908 or the Fromer Stop type of pistol. There's also the toggle lock design used in the Luger as well as the Borchardt pistol. But generally speaking, today, the handguns that you're going to find, or the semi-automatic handguns that you're going to find, are going to be of those three families that I mentioned earlier. Double action, single action, or double action only hammer-fired, 1911 style, as well as your striker-fired guns like the Glock. This Sig Sauer P226 is a double action / single action hammer-fired semi-automatic handgun. Now what that means is there's a hammer on the gun that when you press the trigger is released and strikes the firing pin. The firing pin is driven into the primer, which sets the gun off. But I mentioned this gun is double action and single action. Now what that means is there's a lever on the side of the gun, a decock lever, that allows me to safely decock the firearm. Yep. Perfect. Pressing the trigger on a firearm of this type does two things. Double action. The first action is it draws the hammer to the rear. The second action, it releases. It draws the hammer to the rear, action 1, releases, action 2. In addition, when this particular gun fires and the slide comes rearward to reload the next round, it leaves the hammer cocked to the rear and ready to fire, which means that this particular type of handgun has two trigger pull weights. The first shot in double action, which is heavy, in this particular case about 12 pounds, and the second shot, which is in single action, which is going to be much lighter, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 pounds. To operate and fire this gun, the first thing I'm going to do is lock the slide to the rear. Then I can insert a magazine. I insert the magazine into the magazine well until it locks into place. I then grab the rear of the slide, pull it back, and let it fly forward to chamber around. You'll notice that the hammer is to the rear. I'll use the decock lever to safely lower the hammer so that I could holster it in a safe condition. Now, to fire this weapon, I'm going to come on to target, I'm going to press the trigger, and remember that first shot's going to be double action, so it's going to have that heavy first shot. The shots after that will be nice and easy because the hammer will be locked to the rear. On most semi-automatic handguns, including this one, after you fire your last shot, the slide will lock to the rear. When it's time to unload, press the magazine release button to take the magazine out, rack the slide a few times, and lock it to the rear, and conduct my safety check. And then we're good to go. This Glock is what would be called a striker-fired gun. What that means is there's not a hammer anywhere on this gun, and there's not one inside either. The way this gun operates is by use of a striker that's held back under spring tension. When the trigger is pressed, the striker is released and it goes forward under spring tension and it strikes the primer, setting off the round. This gun is not double action / single action. This gun's trigger tension is the same shot to shot to shot, which means it doesn't have a heavy first shot and a lighter second shot. It's the same. The way that we function this particular gun is we lock the slide to the rear, take our magazine out and insert our magazine until we feel it lock into place. Pull the slide to the rear and release it to chamber the round. And fire. You'll notice on the last shot, the slide locks to the rear, telling us it's empty. We simply press the magazine release button, take the magazine out, conduct our safety check, and we're finished. The gun that I have in my hand now is a Colt 1911 officer's model in 45 ACP. Now, although this gun has a hammer, it operates differently than the Sig Sauer P226 and similar double action / single action semi-automatic handguns that we've seen. In that, the trigger in this particular gun serves only one purpose. It releases the hammer. There is no mechanism for the hammer to be drawn back, so the hammer has to be back to be released. Pressing the trigger otherwise does nothing. All the trigger does is release the hammer. And was designed to be carried in what's called a cocked and locked condition. That means the gun is loaded, the hammer is to the rear, and the safety is on. Now, when the safety is on, you cannot do anything with the weapon. It would be holstered in this condition, and when it was time to shoot, you would draw the weapon out of the holster, flip the safety off, and press the trigger. This is how this gun functions. The slide is to the rear. I insert a magazine into the gun until it locks into place. I pull the slide to the rear and release, thus chambering around. Now, if I was going to holster this weapon, I would flip the safety on and I could safely holster the weapon. When it's time to shoot, I flip the safety off and I press the trigger. You'll notice that on the last round, the slide locks to the rear, telling us it's empty. At this point, we press the magazine release button to release the magazine, conduct our safety check, and we're good to go.